Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the online series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. We kicked off the brand new format in the previous episode, which I've linked down in the description below, and in that one I used what I think is a really strong team featuring Sun as well as Calyrex Shadow Rider, so we'll be playing a couple more matches with it today. Details for the team are in the description below, and let's just get started. For our very first game of the day, we're up against Palkia plus Zacian, okay? Palkia plus Zacian is not exactly like the most common duo, but it's one that we actually went up against yesterday. And Palkia in general, I think, is really strong, especially because it is just like a really good Dynamax option. One of the main weaknesses of Palkia is that without Dynamax, you are relying on Spatial Rend and Hydro Pump, which are somewhat inaccurate. But with Dynamax, you know, you get to just have 100% accurate attacks. So I don't like the Grimmsnarl on their end. I don't know if Thundurus is Defiant Thundurus, and that's the other problem. Because the thing about Grimmsnarl is they can obviously just set up screens, and that's kind of a nuisance for us. Honestly, Gastrodon with Yawn here is really intriguing to me, but I don't know who to drop. All of our Pokemon are solid here. Okay, I'm going to go with Gastrodon, Charizard, Groudon, and Calyrex. Now, I think there are a lot of different ways we could have played this in Team Preview. The main thing about Incineroar is that it only helps me out against Zacian. Now, the thing is that, you know, Zacian is obviously a really big threat, but we have a lot of anti-Zacian with this team. So I don't really feel the need for it. It does feel a little bit bad to drop Thundurus, thanks to me having Eerie Impulse as well as Thunder Wave. So, yeah, but the thing is that the Thundurus is really useless against their Thundurus if they're Dynamax offensive Thundurus, and I don't want to just, like, have a dead Pokemon out in the beginning of the game, so, yeah. Either way, though, thank you so much as always for watching Road to Rank, and I hope you enjoyed the Series 12 content as we get started with this brand new format, so if you do enjoy, please show your support by leaving a like in the video, I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, if you have played Legends Arceus, I'm curious what you think about the game right now. Obviously, there's around a lot of hype around it at the moment, and I actually haven't, you know, gotten to play it yet, but I'm excited to dive in. So they're going to lead with Thundurus plus Amoongus. Okay. I think I'm actually going to play really aggressive here on turn 1 because I think Charizard should survive a Max Lightning, so I don't mind just going for a Yawn. Dynamax. I could Airstream here over Wildfire. Because if I Airstream here, it allows me to potentially outspeed them the next turn. If they don't Airstream on turn 1. But I suppose if they do Airstream, well, then I could actually Max Guard. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go Yawn, Dynamax, and go for Max Airstream here immediately onto Amoongus. So we'll see if they Dynamax Thundurus here. I think one of the interesting questions to ask as I use this team, and they're not going to Max Thundurus. Okay, so it could be just an Eerie Impulse, which I'm okay with. Could be a Thunder Wave. I'm honestly also okay with that. Could just be a Wild Charge. That would be an interesting option for them. My other question is, what is the item on Amoongus? Is it Koba or Focus Sash? Because both of those can potentially allow them to survive here, and that could be a problem. Oh. They're just slower with Thundurus. Okay, I didn't think about that as a possibility. I don't mind that, honestly. Yeah. So maybe they have enough in speed investment to outspeed like Urshifu, but not enough for like the base 100s like Charizard. That's my best guess. Okay, and they just go for a Rage Powder, which is fine. The question is whether or not you can take this attack from Charizard. But honestly, because they're... Okay, so they're not Koba. Yeah, it is Focus Sash. So that's where Wildfire would have helped. But the thing is, I think it still works out okay for us on turn 1. The interesting thing here is giving Gastrodon a speed boost. Or actually, I should say giving Charizard the speed boost. Okay, they're going to go for Airstream as well. But the thing is, because I'm faster than you, yeah, obviously it's really good news for us. This next turn is interesting. I think I'm just going to launch Wildfire out. I mean, if you're Amoongus here this next turn, you always Rage Powder. And then Thundurus should max Airstream. See, the thing is, I could, like, max Guard here, right? And then Ice Beam. I could just launch Wildfire here, honestly. That's also not a terrible option, in my opinion. Yeah, I honestly think I'm okay just going for a Wildfire here and a Yawn into the Amoongus. Or sorry, Wildfire into Amoongus, Yawn into the Thundurus slot. Because it essentially, they should be Assault Vest Thundurus, given that they're not Life Orb. That's my best guess. And it's not like because they have Fly, they should be physical here as well, right? Now, normally you can get around the sleep by setting up Electric Terrain, but Thundurus isn't grounded, so unless they're Lumberry, then we should be in pretty good shape. I really wanted to consider protecting here, because like the Charizard can potentially get one more super powerful attack off here. But one, there's a chance my opponent reads into a Max Guard on Charizard and Airstreams the Gastrodon. And two, even if I trade Charizard here for a Yawn on Thundurus and G-Max Wildfire for the next 4 turns of the game, or next 3, I should say, I think that's a decent trade for us, honestly. Yeah, they up for Max Lightning here. That's fine. So, like, I could have gone Max Guard into Ice Beam, and then Charizard would have had this speed boost, right? So I'd get a G-Max Wildfire off and, like, whatever comes in after the Amoongus, but I still think this is an okay trade-off for us, honestly, because I have, you know, my restricted Pokemon still in the back, just waiting to end this game. So the main thing that really helped us, honestly, is that the fact that I was actually faster than Thundurus. I was not expecting that, but it's a very pleasant surprise. So thinking about what they could have in the back, right? There is definitely the potential for Palkia, Zacian. Both of those make a lot of sense. The key thing to note here is that the Thundurus does have a speed boost, meaning that it can outspeed my Calyrex. So because I think we have Focus Sash on Calyrex and because Groudon's bulkier, I think I'd rather go out into Groudon first here. Because the idea is that Thundurus will have to fall asleep or switch out unless you're Lumberry here. But I think Lum is not exactly the most common item. They're going to go into Zacian. What I didn't want to do is bring out my Calyrex and just let them max Airstream and then like double up into a Calyrex slot, right? So I don't mind this position too much. And I don't really think I need to target the Thundurus here. I guess the main thing to watch out for is like an Airstream into a Behemoth Blade KOing Groudon. I don't mind Earth Powering into Zacian here, but the question is maybe I should consider protecting. I'm down for a protect here, I think. Because Thundurus is in a really tricky spot right now. They're actually going to stay in. Okay, and Zacian protects. So if they're not Lum on the Thundurus, I think this puts us in an absolutely amazing position. So we'll see. I expect Airstream into Groudon here, but could just be into the Gastrodon as well. Yep, they do target Groudon, okay. And we don't take that much, so I should survive a +1 Behemoth Blade from Zacian right now, I think. The only tricky thing here is that it will give Zacian a speed boost, but I think that's okay. And like the reason I'm Earth Powering into Zacian here is because I don't want Zacian to get a free substitute up if it has it. That would actually put us in a really weird spot. Okay, so Thundurus does fall asleep here. Okay, and they're not Lumberry. That's amazing for us then, I think, because now my opponent's essentially only playing with 1 Pokemon this subsequent turn. They have no switching into Precipice Blades either, so I'm content to just Earth Power into the Zacian and Precipice Blades here. I could go for Rock Slide, but Precipice Blades is just so much more damage and covers for any switching as well, right? Like, if you switch Palkia and it's taking at least 30-40%, if not more. They're actually going to switch Zacian out, okay? And it's Incineroar as their final Pokemon. So it's really interesting because, you know, in Series 12, you have 2 restricted Pokemon, but sometimes, you know, players don't feel comfortable bringing both. And Instant here actually has a switch and does work out decently well for my opponent, but the thing is they just gave up the speed boost on Zacian, meaning now let my Calyrex outspeed it in the endgame as well. And this is a classic example of just like taking advantage of the fact that my opponent just doesn't have any ground type switch-ins other than Thundurus, right? And Thundurus is on the field already. So because they protected that last turn, this double up is incredibly safe. There's essentially no way around it for my opponent at this point. So we won't get the knockout there, but that is totally okay with me. We just have such a numbers lead right now. My opponent is not threatening with very much offense either, which is also good news for us. Last turn of G-Max Wildfire. It's probably going to be a fake out into Groudon. I actually really don't mind a double protect here, because it makes the next turn a lot more awkward for my opponent. Now, one way they could get around this is actually hard switching Instant out into their Zacian, but they're not going to go for it. The reason I like double protecting here is because I think there's a good chance neither of my opponent's Pokemon carry protect, meaning that this next turn, you're basically forced to switch out, right? I also didn't want to take fake out chip damage on Groudon and potentially be in KO range from Behemoth Blade, right? So the thing is, now I threaten 2 knockouts simultaneously this turn, which is obviously good news for us. So there is no more Wildfire. They're at +2 speed. I'm content to just Rock Slide with Groudon right now. And honestly, just Ice Beam here into Thundurus, I think. I don't even really care about them switching out, because if they switch, then if they switch to Thundurus out, you give up the speed boost. They do manage to wake up. Okay, they go for Fly. So that's a strong option. Hopefully Rock Slide connects here. Okay, does manage to connect. Sweet. We get the knockout there. Okay. So Fly is a pretty strong option. I think there's a decent chance they double up onto the Groudon slot right now. But I think the key thing to note is that I should be faster with my Calyrex against their Zacian now, because we're max speed. They did a good job playing around G-Max Wildfire, though. I think if Zacian takes, you know, 1 or 2 more turns, they're in a really bad spot. The Fly play there is nice as well, because that's their one way around, like, getting double knocked out. I don't think an Ice Beam actually KOs Thundurus here. Honestly, I'm down to just Earth Power and press Rock Slide in this position, I think. I'm intimidated, but I really don't want to switch out in this position. And the key thing to note is right now my opponent doesn't threaten with the double knockout. And if I get an Earth Power off into the Zacian, it should just be in KO range from Astral Barrage. Fly doesn't really do significant damage. It could do enough where, like, Fly into Behemoth Blade KOs Groudon, right? But the key thing here is that my opponent, I don't think, is ever knocking out both Pokemon, meaning that I get at least 1 attack off. And that alone is good enough for me. Yep, so it's Fly into the Groudon slot. They are just going to Behemoth Blade as well. So I could have, like, protected the Groudon, actually, but I was a little bit nervous about a play, like, Zacian having Play Rough, and that doesn't even KO Groudon, wow. So I wouldn't be surprised if my opponent just has a lot of bulk on both Thundurus and Zacian, but as a result chose to give up a little bit of offense and speed, right? Given how slow the Thundurus was. Like, the fact that it was slower than Charizard was really surprising to me, but I think made this match a lot easier because given that they were Focus Sash on Amoongus, if Thundurus was indeed faster and we just trade max Airstreams on turn 1, it's actually pretty bad news for us. Because then the Thundurus can just threaten with the max Lightning turn 2 to just KO the Charizard before I get an attack off. Okay, I'm content to just Ice Beam Thundurus now and Precipice Blades. At this point, an Astral Barrage will just pick up a double knockout, so even if I somehow lose both Pokemon here, we're still fine. Now, Zacian does get access to some priority attacks, but I think almost all of them are normal type, like Quick Attack. So, yeah, I don't really think we have much to worry about. Plus, if Thundurus isn't running a Dark type attack, you can't even actually hit Calyrex for super good damage. Your best bet is like a Wild Charge, but, you know, we can definitely take one of those. So, the decision to give up Palkia in this one was interesting because I thought it was actually a decently strong Dynamax option. Ooh, they've got Brick Break. Okay. I really like Brick Break because so many players run Grimmsnarl. So, you know, sometimes you'll run Superpower over Brick Break, but Brick Break makes a lot of sense because it gives you a lot more utility and allows you to bring regular Thundurus and just break through screens, right? And so the reason I'm Ice Beaming into Thundurus here is because, yeah, you know, you revealed Fly. Fly is really your only way around getting knocked out here. But the thing is, even if you Fly, well, I've got the Focus Sash on the Calyrex anyway, right? So it's like, I'm just guaranteed to just double knockout with Astral Barrage the subsequent turn anyway. So it's the nice thing about conserving this Calyrex for the end game. And so I think, you know, for my opponent's end, it makes sense to not bring that Palkia because you're probably nervous about going up against Gastrodon. But the thing is that Palkia, as a Dynamax option, can max Wormwind, and I don't really have great answers actually to max Wormwind if you look at my team comp, right? Like, if you take a look, I don't have a single resist to Dragon, but part of the reason maybe they were a little bit hesitant was fear of Thundurus being an offensive Thundurus here, and so, you know, you don't want to activate Defiant potentially that way. But I think Palkia still would have served my opponent pretty well over the Incineroar, for example. And they actually didn't bring Grimmsnarl, which I'm pretty happy about as well, because I was not particularly fond of the idea of them setting up screens and then just, like, taking my attacks really well. So not seeing that was also, I think, generally a good sign for us. But either way, yeah, we continue to go up against the Zacian team. So once again, that's why I wanted to feature this team. I think it has a very favorable matchup against a lot of Zacian comps that you'll go up against. So let's keep things going. All right, our second game of the day here, and it's Zacian, Calyrex, Krookodile, Indeedee, Whimsicott, and Urshifu. So 4 of the 6 Pokemon here were, it reminds me very much of Ryota Otsubo's Invitational team. Although he didn't have Krookodile, right? That was Sajum Park that had Krookodile on his team. I think Tailwind's going to be a really big issue for us. There's 2 things I'm really worried about here. They have Tailwind and they have Indeedee, meaning that they can set up Psychic Terrain, so I can't even really disrupt with Thundurus nearly as much. So both of those are pretty big problems for us, in my opinion. And the upside is that I think Charizard is a really interesting Dynamax option because they're... I mean, I'm also wondering, like, what maxes on my opponent's end? It actually feels like the Calyrex should. So I think, like, Indeedee plus Calyrex is a very strong combo from their end, but we've got Focus Sash on my Calyrex here, which I actually think is very good. So here I'm thinking Calyrex plus Charizard lead, Groudon in the back, and then Incin is the final Pokemon. I'd want to bring Gastrodon normally, but the thing is that my opponent's team is really fast-paced and offensive, and so I don't know if I really get the opportunity to even yawn in to begin with. I think you can make a very good argument for it, and I think if my opponent didn't have Indeedee, I'm always bringing Thundurus for Thunder Wave and Eerie Impulse, but Indeedee alone makes Thundurus really sad, because if you set up Indeedee early and you have that Psychic Terrain, I literally can't do anything other than Thunderbolt. So I think you could make a decent argument for Gastrodon, but I don't know who I'd really want to drop for it. You could maybe drop Incineroar. I like both of my restricteds here. I like Charizard a lot as well because even if they get up Tailwind, they don't necessarily threaten the Charizard with a one-hit knockout, and I think that's really important here. They're just going to go with Whimsicott and Calyrex. Okay, I'm very much okay with this. Because, like, yes, they threaten me with Astral Barrage, but that's basically it. I think the scary thing here is them potentially having Trick with Whimsicott. I don't love the idea of them being Trick Eject Button and forcing Charizard out. The thing is, I can go up very quickly to a 4-2 lead here on turn 1. I just think the odds of them having Trick here are actually, like, somewhat high. And that's what really concerns me. Okay, if they have it, so be it. They still have to go for it. The reason why I'm playing like this is because we can win the game literally on turn 1 if they don't have Trick here. They do have an Indeedee on their team as well, so, you know, sometimes that counteracts Trick, although, yeah. I think it's still potentially winnable even if they have Trick here anyway, because then I can bring in Incin and just fake out Astral Barrage on turn 2, but then there might be a speed tie. I don't think we actually necessarily need a Dynamax to win this game, and if they don't have Trick, then we can just win immediately. And they just Tailwind. Okay, amazing. Oh, got really laggy there for a sec. Beautiful. This is where the Focus Sash is just so huge, right? So, like, the idea here is, yeah, okay, you do a lot of damage, but I get a double knockout to start the game. And I've got Incineroar in the back to swap in for Intimidate. So, yeah. Nice. Whimsicott hangs on. Beautiful. They're Focus Sashed. Which is good because it actually, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten Wildfire off, and I'm not sure Charizard gets another attack off in this game at this point anyway. So the idea is, okay, I go up 4-2. Yeah, they get Tailwind up, and normally Tailwind is pretty scary, right? I'm mainly curious what Dynamax is from their end, because you're going to have Zacian in the back, but that obviously can't Dynamax. So you would think, like, Calyrex felt like the best max option by far to me, but it makes sense that they didn't want to max there, because, you know, you're staring down my Calyrex and you're Life Orbed. Yep, so there's Zacian, no surprise. Krookodile? Yeah, that makes the most sense. Okay. So you're going to Dynamax Krookodile, you're going to Max Quake, Max Rockfall. Max Rockfall on a Charizard, that's pretty powerful as a play. Since we have Shuka Berry, I'm totally okay, I think, switching out here into Incin. And then Max Guarding this turn. And then I can fake out the Zacian. Like, the amazing thing for us right now is I get 3 turns of Wildfire on both of these Pokemon. Krookodile's going to Dynamax, so it's not going to take that much damage, but Zacian's going to lose 50% just from the turns of Wildfire here, and that's good. The other good thing is that my opponent only has physical Pokemon at this point in the game, right? And so the idea is that I can cycle in Intimidate with Incineroar to decrease their attacks, allowing me to bring Groudon out in the late game and then just click Precipice Blades. And this is why I wanted to push the tempo so much on turn 1 of the game, right? Because it's like, my opponent can't really get around the Intimidates at this point, and I've got Wildfire set up, so even though they're faster and they will have this, you know, Dynamax, and ultimately my Charizard will probably only get 1 attack off, I think that's totally worth it in my eyes. Krookodile was scary, but it can only do so much damage, right? And because I've got Chocoberry here, like, even if you were to Max Quake the Calyrex as I switched out, that's okay. Things do get actually pretty dicey, though, if they end up knocking out Incineroar here with, like, a Max Quake and a, close combat or Sacred Sword double up. And so if they made that read, that's an incredible play. Okay, it's just Behemoth Blade for now, so that in itself is fine. Okay, Incin's gonna take some pretty good damage, actually. 51 there still. And they Rockfall. Okay, beautiful. So that's good. Now there's Wildfire. Should just be a Rockfall from Krookodile here this next turn, right? I could switch out Charizard, but I actually think I'm content just to stay in here. I'm gonna fake out Zacian. And just Wildfire it. The reason I'm okay with this, because I could see my opponent making a read and say, okay, well, you're going to switch out Charizard, so I'm just going to Quake the Incin anyway. And if they were to do that and not protect Zacian, I win the game immediately. Even if they make the most obvious play, which is just protect Zacian and Rockfall into the Charizard, I'm still okay with that. I don't really see too much utility in conserving Charizard at this point in the game. Like, I've gotten what I've wanted out of it, right? I'm gonna flinch, and they do Quake. Yeah, this is exactly what I mean, right? What I didn't want to do was switch out Charizard and, like, get crit by the Incineroar, right? Because I'm not putting any damage pressure on if I'm switching Charizard out this turn. And so the idea there is that, like, if I switch, I actually lose a lot of momentum here. Whereas, let's say they do just go for the obvious Rockfall. I'm totally okay with that, because then I just get a free switch it into my Groudon. And at this point, Groudon's looking pretty good, right? I've got an Intimidate off against both of my opponent's Pokemon, and I can use the Calyrex in the back basically as a free switch in. So I can switch the Incin out, sacrifice Calyrex, and then bring Incineroar back in. And so, yeah, I think it certainly makes sense for my opponent to make a big play like that, because they're already so far behind in this game. And once again, that's exactly why on turn 1 I wanted to just push the tempo of the game immediately. So now it's 4v1. Not really much they can do. Yeah, I could just Parting Shot and Blast Burn here. I think the objective correct play is to switch out the Incineroar here into Calyrex, so that I get another Intimidate off. But at this point, Krookodile is never winning 1v1 against a Groudon, even if you get a bunch of crits, to be honest. Okay, so Incin's gonna go down. And unfortunately, we don't get to see the sick Blast Burn animation. Also really does not do too much damage, but that's okay. We're just waiting for the Groudon endgame at this point anyway. So, Killing Peter's out, and now I'm just going to bring out Groudon. I could bring Calyrex out as well, I guess, go for a Will-O-Wisp, but even if Krookodile gets, like, crits here, Groudon's just entirely too bulky. We could potentially lose, I guess, off, like, infinite misses. Because, Calyrex has Astral Barrage, but they're at +2 special defense, so I just need one Precipice Blades to connect and we'll win the game. And we're faster. Cool. So, Precipice Blades is going to connect, and that's going to get the knockout. I think the key thing here is that my opponent just led the Calyrex, and we just had a super good lead, right? Like, we went up instantly in this game. So, I think a really interesting lead they could have went with was Whimsicott plus Krookodile, because then you pressure Tailwind into max Rockfall and Charizard on turn 1. Although, if I stare down Whimsicott plus Krookodile, I'm probably just switching Charizard out into the Incineroar turn 1 and would go for a Will-O-Wisp onto the Krookodile to try to shut it down immediately. So, I think I was adequately prepared for any combo that they could have had, but it worked out even better for us. And so, yeah. Turn 1 was just a little bit scary because I was very much nervous about them having the switcheroo with the eject button. Just because on that team there were multiple Pokemon that I think Focus Sash is a strong item on. Both the Urshifu that they had as well as Calyrex, I think, are very viable users for Focus Sash. And so I was like, okay, well, if you don't have Sash on it, what other item would you even want to run on Whimsicott? But realistically, given that we saw the final items, it was probably Life Orb. I mean, it was Life Orb on Calyrex, Sash on Whimsicott, and then if I had to guess, probably Choice Band on the Urshifu. So, yeah. Either way, though, that was a very fast-paced game. So let's look for one more. All right. With that last win, I actually got to Master Ball tier, so that's neat. And we are now up against Kyogre Zacian. Okay, so this is a really interesting dynamic. I mean, these comps are going to be pretty common as well. And, we went up against a very similar team in, what was it, Game 3 yesterday? The interesting thing here is debating about bringing Gastrodon. I don't know whether or not their Ferrothorn is Power Whip, so that's one really interesting question. Truthfully, I mean, Gastrodon's kind of designed for these matchups, but we have so many strong Pokemon here. I don't even know if I want to bring it. Thundurus is really good because of Taunt. That's helpful against Porygon. It's really good for T-Wave. I really want to max Charizard here, I think. The alternative is I could not bring Charizard and go with the top 4 Pokemon, right? Thundurus, Calyrex, Groudon, Gastrodon. I don't think that's a terrible idea either, actually. I just enjoy playing with Charizard so much with this team. It's so fun. Okay, I'm actually down for a Thundurus Gastrodon lead, and I'll probably angle towards Dynamaxing Groudon in this game. The main reason I'd want to bring Charizard is because it gives me a better matchup in a Ferrothorn, and I think that, as we saw yesterday, or in the previous episode, my opponent had Power Whip on Ferrothorn, and I think that Gastrodon's going to be an increasingly common Pokemon in Series 12 because it's very good against the Zacian Kyogre duo, so you're going to need answers against Gastrodon, right? And one answer is play rough on Zacian, second is just Power Whip. You go with Porygon and Zacian. Okay. I'm fine with this, right? I mean, there are a lot of things we can do on turn 1. I can just Thunder Wave into the Zacian, I could Yawn into it, I could Taunt it to Porygon. I think I should assume play rough here on Zacian until I see otherwise. Ooh, they trace Prankster. That's interesting. T-Wave is also slightly questionable here because maybe they set up Trick Room. I'm down for a Taunt onto Porygon and a Yawn onto the Zacian slot, I think. Because them setting up Trick Room isn't the worst case scenario here if it means a free switch into Groudon. Now, I think that what's really interesting here is, does the Zacian have Play Rough? If you do, you're in a substantially better position. Actually, they just go for Protect, though. Okay, that works for me. Free Taunt onto the Porygon is always a good start. Might just be an Ice Beam or Tri-Attack from their end to chip away. Okay. Yeah, they go for Ice Beam. That's a nice play. Pretty good damage there, actually. Would have been sweet if I yawned into the Porygon slot as well, but that's okay. Now that I know you're taunted, though, I'm actually intrigued by the idea of Thunder Waving the Zacian just to make sure this is shut down. And actually yawn now into the Porygon slot. Because the thing is, if Zacian is paralyzed, then, like, hey, it paves the way for Groudon, right? I think, like, one thing I want to angle for in this game is just looking for a single Swords Dance with the Groudon. Groudon with Gastrodon next to it is really, really nice to deal with this Kyogre right now. And because I know the Porygon is taunted, like, there's not really much you can do here other than going for another Ice Beam, so cool. I'll get the Thunder Wave off. I didn't want to Yawn there, by the way, out of fear of them potentially having Substitute and blocking the Yawn. They do have Play Rough, though. Okay, cool. They just target Thundurus, though, which is totally fine with me. And just an Ice Beam. Cool. As long as we don't get frozen here, I think this is a very good turn. Okay, sweet. I think even though we've lost a Pokemon, I've gotten a lot of disruption off, right? Like, Porygon's taunted and Yawn, essentially forcing it to angle for a switch out right now, and Zacian is paralyzed. So we can bring in Groudon now. Now, the interesting thing about bringing Groudon right now is, just Precipice Blades, just one-shot the Zacian. I could even just Dynamax Groudon right now. My fear is that they actually brought Zapdos in the back. That would be kind of wild. Like, the play I lean towards most is actually just Dynamax, go for Quake into Zacian here. And then just keep yawning the Porygon slot and force them to rotate out and in. I'm down for that. The only problem with this is that they brought Zapdos in the back, but I don't think Zapdos even makes that much sense in this matchup, so if they actually have it as a switch in, and they are switching it out, is that Zapdos? Wow. Well done. Oh, that's the one thing that could have messed us up. I think it's still fine, but I lose so much momentum off that turn. Right, I had the opportunity to angle for like a Swords Dance there potentially. So nicely done. This is like great recognition because Zapdos doesn't offer my opponent very much in this matchup. But the one thing it offers is a free switch into Max Quake. And so, you know, my opponent recognizes that and, yeah, makes a great play around it. So nicely done. The good thing is, even if you max Gastron right now, you can't max Lightning either Pokemon, so it's not like you can actually prevent Sleep from happening right now. But that's a very painful turn. I could have Quaked, but I just really wanted to pressure Zacian out there right now, and I was like, what are the odds they actually have Zapdos out in the back? But I guess I should just assume that they have it until I see otherwise. Okay, so now you can, like, Dynamax and then Airstream into Water Spout, but your Kyogre is Yawn, so the question is, does Kyogre contemplate switching out here? It feels really bad to potentially protect Groudon here. But I really don't want to take a Water Spout either, so I think I'm actually going to go for a Max Guard here and just go for a Yawn. I think the tough thing for them right now is breaking through my Yawn cycles. And I don't necessarily need Dynamax to win this game, honestly. But that last turn was the one in which I could have gained such a huge advantage if I, either Rock Fall into the Zapdos slot, or if I just Quake into the Porygon, which went into Kyogre, because not only does it give me so much damage on a Kyogre, but it also gives me a special defense boost. That's a really big deal in the context of this matchup. So, yeah. Not getting that last turn right makes this a lot harder. But they're going to stay in with Kyogre. So, that's a big deal, right? Because if you're not buried here, I mean, there's no way to really get around the Sleep. That's why I wanted a Max Guard here. It's just safe, right? I really don't want to take an Airstream into a Specs Water Spout, just lose Groudon for nothing. So, feels a little bit painful to not get a single, amount of damage off on my 2 turns of Dynamax, but I think we have a pretty good team advantage here, so I'm okay with that. And yeah, they're going all in here. They went for Airstream and Origin Pulse. Beautiful. And this sets up Gastron to deal even better in the end game, right? And so, I'm really, really glad I brought Gastron here, because I feel like I didn't really get to utilize it yesterday, and it is just a really good Pokemon. So, I get Yawn off successfully into Zapdos, and now, unless you're actually Lumberry or Chesto here on Kyogre, it is going to be very difficult for you to come back in this game, I think, actually. Especially thanks to that early paralysis. So Max Quake into Kyogre here is super free, and I'm actually just going to double up into that slot because I could see them switching it out. If they stay in with Kyogre, that's totally okay with me as well. At this point, you're in a really weird spot thanks to Yawn cycling. And the main thing is that this highlights how good Yawn Gastron can be, right? We essentially capitalize off them having a passive Porygon 2. And it's like Porygon 2 itself doesn't really pressure Gastron with much damage, especially because they weren't download, right? And so it's not like they got a special attack boost and threatened me with the Dynamax on turn 1, and then, like a +1 Max Strike coming from Tri-Attack. So as a result, it's like I can just keep going for Yawn, and it essentially forces you to keep switching out. That's why the early paralysis on Zacian also, was super good for us to see. So, okay, they just go for Airstream. I think that's the correct decision here. Ooh, that is a lot of damage, though. I don't know if I love that. But the thing is, if your Zapdos is falling asleep... Yeah, okay, they're Life Orb. That makes a lot of sense. Since they're Life Orb and you're not buried here, I mean, Zapdos is also going to fall asleep, so my opponent's essentially going to be playing like a 2v1, right? Or I'll have 2 Pokemon, whereas they'll only have 1 that can actually attack. And it's like, yeah, well, you'll bring Zacian out, but that's not really that scary. Now I'll get the knockout on a Kyogre. Special defense boost on Groudon also very much appreciated, just to take damage from the Porygon, and its Ice Beam's a little bit better. So I could have angled towards protecting Gastron there, but nah, I think it's fine to just attack, honestly. Okay, they fall asleep. Perfect. That's turn 2 of their Dynamax, so they don't get a 3rd max move off, and that is really good for us. Interesting, they actually bring Porygon out. I would have thought they'd want the Zacian out, but I guess they probably feel pressure. And this is kind of funny, they actually trace the drought, changing the weather. Now, I think one thing to be a little bit scared about is the Porygon potentially having access to Foul Play here, right? I'm honestly down to just protect and Yawn into Porygon right now. This game actually isn't over by any means, especially because the Zapdos has that speed boost. Because I want to confirm this turn. If first of all, if they go for a target onto the Groudon, I get a Yawn off into the Porygon, it's really bad news for them. Now, what's interesting for my opponent's end is, do you worry about recover from the Gastrodon? If you do, then you might just... Okay, I think this is a great play by their end. That's a really good play. The hard switch into Zacian immediately. Nicely done. Because my opponent recognizes, hey, Zapdos really isn't doing much for me at this point anyway. But the thing is, okay, well, now you switched in Zacian on a Groudon, so I pressure with Precipice Blades a little bit more this next turn. That was really risky by them as well, because if I just went for Precipice Blades, I think they'd be in terrible shape. But this is interesting. They're actually angling for a Trick Room. Okay. I like that. I like that play on there, and I think that's smart. So with Trick Room now, Gastrodon should still have speed. I am down to switch Groudon out into Calyrex because I don't have too much utility out of Calyrex here, and I want to Earth Power here because Porygon's in a weird spot thanks to the Yawn, right? Like, you might look towards switching out into Zapdos, but if you do that, then you don't have much damage going into the next turn of the game. So far, I've only seen Trick Room and Ice Beam on Porygon, and those are both pretty standard. And I'm switching out here because, yeah, I just really don't want Groudon to faint to a double up right now. Okay. Calyrex comes out. They're not going to switch Porygon, which I think is a good sign for us. And Earth, oh my gosh, that's almost just a KO in itself. I actually did forget about the fact we had a special attack boost, so yeah, that would make sense. Yep, they Ice Beam into Calyrex, and yeah, they're going all in here to knock out Groudon, and so that's exactly what I'm trying to deny here. But in my eyes, basically, like, what's the worst case here, right? They double up onto the Gastrodon. Actually, the absolute worst case is, like, Ice Beam critical hit KOs me, but Yawn was just the MVP of this game. Like, Gastrodon was so important for us here, so I'm really glad I brought it because I feel like I didn't really get to utilize or just show off how good it can potentially be in yesterday's episode. But now this gives me a free switch into Groudon, and the beautiful thing here is that Gastrodon still outspeeds Zacian under Trick Room, right? So, yeah. Even if you have Foul Play at this point, I think I can just Swords Dance anyway. So, Swords Dance here, and then just Earth Power into Zacian. I can actually look for Ice Beam here on Zacian instead. I just don't know if that guarantees a knockout. I'd rather not risk it, and I don't really care about a Zapdos switch in right now. Right, my opponent has 2 Pokemon that are fully asleep, and haven't taken a single turn of sleep yet. And even if they get an early wake up with Porygon, and they have Foul Play, I'm still honestly not that worried. We could also angle towards stalling out Trick Room potentially. Like, I think if they get anything more than a 1-turn sleep here with Porygon, the game is just immediately over, even if they protect Zacian here. And it looks like they're going for the protect, but unfortunately they get fully paralyzed, and so I think that in itself also may just end the game for them. But I don't really think, like, even if you don't get that protect off, then the next turn I would probably just Ice Beam Rock Slide that slot. So, yeah, I don't really think it makes much of a difference, but just makes it even tougher for my opponent now. There is an argument to be made to maybe just going for Precipice Blades here, but the thing is, by going for this Swords Dance now, I can just immediately one-shot the Zapdos with, or I guess maybe use 2 hits to KO it with Rock Slide plus Ice Beam. I do think Porygon here will most likely have Trick Room, actually, but that's fine. Or sorry, not Trick Room, Foul Play. But there's only 2 turns of Trick Room left, right? So it's like, okay, well, I can just Rock Slide into Ice Beam. Even if you wake up, it's fine. Foul Play shouldn't KO Groudon, then I can just protect Groudon and then Yawn the next turn. So they need to wake up right now to even stay in the game. Actually, I guess like Porygon could still theoretically win because I'm still relying on inaccurate attacks on Groudon, right? That's just the main downside of using Groudon. Rock Slide and Precipice Blades are going to miss a fair amount of the time. So we get Ice Beam off and they stay asleep with Porygon. Cool. That should end the game then, I think. Barring a ton of misses at this point. Because this next turn, I'm just going to protect the Groudon. I'm going to protect Groudon, I'm going to Yawn into the Porygon. Actually, instead of Yawning, I think it's better to just Earth Power to put it in Precipice Blade's KO range. Although it might already be in KO range at this point. Yeah, I'm down for Yawn. Because it's like, it covers for them waking up, right? If you stay asleep, then great, Precipice Blade just comes out next turn. The main reason I'm not going for an Earth Power here is because I don't think it actually makes a difference damage-wise right now. Oh, actually, I did forget that they were faster. Or sorry, that I was faster under Trick Room. And there was still one more turn in Trick Room, right? We hadn't installed it out yet. So Earth Power would be better, obviously, for that reason. But that's okay. So recover Ice Beam, Trick Room. You would think Foul Play is the last attack on this Porygon, but I still haven't confirmed that yet. Either way, though, even if I Earth Powered there, I think Porygon would have just healed it all the way back up anyway, so it's fine. Just Precipice Blades here. We definitely don't want to go for another Swords Dance right now, because if they have Foul Play, then I'm actually in danger of getting KO'd by it. So, yeah. Precipice Blades is going to miss here. Okay. It's just Ice Beam, though. They don't have Foul Play. And they target Gastro as well, even better. Cool. Yeah, I mean, in this scenario, they're going to need a lot of luck to win, right? And the lack of a foul play there, I think, essentially now wraps up the game for us. Of course, I could still miss, but I'm just going to double protect here. You could make the argument to actually not protect Gastron, but I don't want to get frozen by an Ice Beam right now. So, yeah. Kind of a long, drawn-out game here, but shout out to Gastron. I mean, it was so good here. It was definitely the MVP of this game. And, you know, they didn't bring Ferrothorn in the end. And if I had led with that Charizard, I think this game would have been a lot harder because I would have been baited into Dynamaxing it early, and that actually would have been really ugly for us. And they, you know, they showed their final attack. It is Eerie Impulse. Okay. So no foul play, which is obviously very, very good news for us, meaning they don't really have a way to beat this Groudon. Their one chance was getting an Ice Beam freeze earlier, so I'm surprised they targeted Gastro there rather than Groudon, especially because Groudon protected the previous turn. So I think that would have been their only real shot of winning this game. Go for the freeze immediately on Groudon the turn after Protect. So now it's just, you know, whether or not we hit some Precipice Blades, single target right now, and Earth Power here should finish off, thanks to the special attack boost we got earlier, I think. There it is, and that's going to be a knockout, and that'll be game. Beautiful. Yeah, so this one was a little bit tricky, mainly because, like, I was thinking about Charizard, but the thing is, even if they bring Ferrothorn and they have Power Whip, I can still Yawn you, I can still Will-O-Wisp you, and, you know, Groudon can still Swords Dance up in front of you, plus I have Taunt from Thundurus, so Ferrothorn would have been a little bit tricky to deal with here. Part of my hesitance in bringing Gastrodon in previous matches was because of multiple Pokemon threatening grass-type attacks, like Seismitoad, for example. But in this one, it was only Ferrothorn. Their only way of really dealing with Gastrodon, well, they had two ways. The first was, Max Airstream from Zapdos, and the second was going to be Zacian. But in this game, we were able to take advantage of the fact that they just had a Porygon that wasn't able to do very much. And in fact, it was like dead weight for my opponent because I was essentially able to take advantage of that, force them to switch out with Yawn, and they essentially, you know, fell asleep with so many different Pokemon, both the Zapdos and the Porygon in this one. So, yeah. That is going to be it for this one, and you can see why I enjoy using this team so much. I think it is just such a strong meta call at the moment, so if you're looking for a way to beat some of those Zacian teams you're running into, I would really, really highly recommend this team. So once again, thank you to the original creators, NJ and North, for the team. Check them out in the description below, as well as a run to and a pace courtesy of them. And yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.